Suddenly, the deep pile beige carpet felt even softer. Too soft, perhaps. But before they could do anything about it, the carpet turned into an ocean of undulating sand. It writhed around their feet at first, the coarse, slithering noise growing as great waves began cascading and swirling all around them. Freya screamed. Geo felt a horrible sinking sensation in his stomach as the Valkyrie dived into the now snubbed fire and disappeared. Just as panic was reaching an all-time high, the sand waves died down, to reveal a games room. It was now Geo's turn to succumb to astonishment. Wow! Now this is what I call a games room. Geo darted about like a child who had stumbled into his fantasy. In his eagerness, he skidded on the black marble floor, nearly smashing into one of the walls of Gothic windows that flanked this barn-sized hall. Geo hugged the arcade machine before running over to the snooker table, pinball machine, and table football without even taking a breath. He leaned against the small bar in an attempt to compose himself before pressing buttons on the 1950s American jukebox and falling into a large beanbag in front of a white wall upon which a video game was being projected. It was all too much for Geo as he flopped his head back and drooled at the focal point of the room, a red pool table with legs of carved flame, complete with crystal playing balls. As Geo lay there, something else caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. "Oh, look! Table tennis!" he said eagerly, as he mustered himself up from the bean bag and ran over to the playing table. "Bet I could slap you down without breaking a sweat, fat one," declared Freya with a smirk. "You're on!" bellowed Geo, gesturing with his bat. "You can even partner with the feeble one if you like. I'll still pound you." "Feeble indeed," replied Urasil, rolling up his sleeves. He turned to Freya. "We'll show him, won't we, my dear?" With the challenge declared, there was nothing more to be said. Urasil, Freya and Geo took up bats and let the competition commence, apparently forgetting the presence of Requiem and Talis entirely. Geo began, striking the ball with such brute force that it buried itself into the table, losing all its bite before floating pitifully over to Freya's bat. "Ha! This is going to be all too easy," taunted Urasil as Freya returned serve with searing force. "Really?" exclaimed Geo. "Have at you!" As he struck back, the ball split into two before hurtling towards his unwitting opposition. Both Freya and Urasil returned a ball each, confident that Geo was never going to be able to hit both. But as the balls flew over the net, they merged into one again for Geo to return comfortably. Again, they split as they fired back over the net to Freya and Urasil. Urasil readied his stance, pulling his arm back so far it looked like it was about to break. "Time to put your own spin on things, my dear." Urasil flung his arm around with such force that he stumbled and fell onto the table with his hood covering his head. However, he did make contact with his ball, which span so hard it turned into a miniature tornado, narrowly avoiding sucking up the net as it veered erratically over to Geo. "Ha! Is that the best you could do?" Geo replied, dancing back to get a run-up. Geo hit Freya's ball, converting it into a white tidal wave which wiped out Urasil's tornado. Freya's bat was ablaze as she swung at the wave, evaporating it and sending the ball thundering back to Geo. As Requiem watched his friends enjoy themselves, the ceiling caught his eye. He cast his gaze upwards and was transfixed by a carpet of small lights in the black ceiling, ebbing and flowing to the bounce of the ball. Noticing Requiem's fixed gaze, Talis said, "Ah, I see you share my fascination with light. These are hundreds of LEDs that react to motion. Quite enchanting, aren't they?" Requiem couldn't tear himself away from the light and only managed a vague reply. "Yes, they're quite soothing." Still transfixed by the lights, he added, "LEDs? Very modern for such an ancient surround." "Indeed, but fitting for such an entertaining space. I sense you like the classics, and if that is the case, I have something that you cannot miss. Your friends are enjoying themselves, they won't miss us for a minute or two," said Talis persuasively. Requiem could not resist. "All right, why not? Let's see something more traditional." Talis led Requiem towards a window on their right. The panes fell out of their framework and smashed silently on the ground as the window became an archway. After walking up a cast-iron spiral staircase for what seemed like an age, they reached a small oak door, humble and unassuming. It was a far cry from the burning black wood doors that had provided entrance to so much else. "Here we are," said Talis proudly. "Follow me." Talis opened the door and bowed very low to get through the small opening. Requiem followed with great anticipation. As he stood up, Requiem's gaze was immediately captured by the sky-blue domed roof they were standing under, and stretched out his hand to touch the Renaissance painting of the sky with angels. Talis had to stop Requiem from falling off a thin lip of white stone they were standing on. "Careful, my friend. The art in this roof is a masterpiece indeed, but take care that it doesn't trick you into becoming one of its angels." Requiem smiled with gratitude as he removed his gaze from the angels and looked at the white stone lip running the circumference of the dome. He thought he saw one of the angels look annoyed, as if he had wanted Requiem to fall. The lip was very thin indeed, no doubt to minimize its disruption of the art, but why have it at all? As he turned to gauge his surroundings, an optical illusion gave away its secret and revealed a small walkway leading to a circular landing of crystal suspended from the centre of the dome. Talis beckoned Requiem onto the crystal landing and pointed down into its centre. "Look," he said reverently. Requiem edged over to the side of the landing and looked down. For what appeared to be an infinite distance below them, Requiem could see tier upon tier of crystal and light cascading down. He had to hold on to the heavy chain fastening the landing to the dome as the light, refracting all the colours of the rainbow off the slowly twisting crystals, mesmerised him. "You are standing on the top tier of the largest chandelier in the world. From the largest tier to the smallest, it is the equal of Romulus or Remus in both height and weight." Talis was clearly pleased by his centrepiece. "It's amazing," replied Requiem breathlessly. "It's more than amazing, but I'm afraid I just don't have the words to do it justice." The clinking of many thousands of crystals inside the great dome was musical, and everywhere Requiem walked he was bathed in rainbows. He was quite taken with the moment. "Tell me, Requiem," said Talis, now on the opposite side of the main tier, "what did you read in the book of Morpheus and Minerva?" Whether it was because Requiem was lost in the moment and his guard was down, or because he genuinely wanted to open up, he told Talis what he had read. "The chapter was Requiem's Song. It spoke of me becoming powerful, more powerful than even those in the ivory tower, powerful enough to conquer the world. It spoke of my rebirth into—" Requiem paused, as if his usual guardedness had returned from its short break. "What? Into what?" hissed Talis, clenching his fist in a wild need to know. "I'm not sure," finished Requiem. "I tossed the book into the fire. I didn't want to read any more," he added lightly. "Why not?" asked Talis in amazement. "The news of such power must be of interest at the very least, even to you." "Yes and no. I'm not sure I believe everything it was trying to tell me. It said that this power would come to me in front of the 5th gate. However, I'm pretty sure there are only 4 gates. I pass them every day." Talis turned to give Requiem his full attention. "I can understand your apprehension, my brother. But let me tell you this as one from the South Gate to another. There is a 5th gate. The bonds between gate brethren are strong. Of these, none are stronger than the bonds between Southgate brethren, especially outside the safety of the gate, as is often the case for groups who are marginalised by all others. Therefore, what secrets 2 Southgate brethren share in the silence of the space they carve out around them can be taken as the truth. This is perhaps why Requiem was so taken aback and, at that moment, stumbled. The musical tones of the crystals shattered. The rainbows merged into piercing, blinding white light, and Requiem fell. As he plummeted towards the spiky centre of the vast chandelier, Talis dived after him. His cloak grew, covering them both, twisting and turning, fluttering red and grey as they fell together. Suddenly they moved up and out, bursting through the side of one of the large tiers, shattering crystal all around them. The crystal shards did not reach the floor, however. After they had passed through the tier, they began to reform, whilst Talis and Requiem landed safely on the floor far below the chandelier. High above them, the chandelier returned to its majestic beauty, pulsing out rainbows and chiming music as Requiem gathered himself. "Thank you," he said guardedly. "Permit me to carry on, now we find ourselves on safer ground?" asked Talis. "Please," nodded Requiem. Talis continued his recount. "You cannot have failed to notice how we dwell in the shadows of this world, hiding ourselves away, whilst the Hafuna march around, oblivious to what they have." Talis started to pace and circle Requiem in the ballroom below the chandelier. Passing through the glass-covered half, he gazed up at the night sky, as if looking for inspiration. With a defining chime from the chandelier, a star haloed in rainbow light was simultaneously reflected in the white marble floor and the glass wall. Talis stopped circling. He knew this was the moment. What he was about to say would have ramifications that not even he could fully comprehend, but say it he must. "How do you think we arrived at this point, Requiem?" Requiem replied in a matter-of-fact manner. "The magical races formed an alliance with the Hafuna for the well-being of all." Talis span around and replied with bitterness. "That is what they want you to believe. They don't want you to feel anything but warmth towards the alliance. They don't want you to question it, as the truth, my brother, is much more sinister." Talis walked up to Requiem and stared into his eyes. "Do you want the truth? I'm afraid I'm going to tell you, whether you can handle it or not," he said, not waiting for an answer, as he span away before rounding on Requiem again. "The truth is that there was an opposing side, a faction that wanted to have the world for itself, and to make the Hafuna skulk in the shadows." "And why not?" shouted Talis, spinning away from Requiem once more, his cloak flashing red as his voice raised forcibly. "We are stronger. Think what we could accomplish out in the open, with all the world's resources at our fingertips. We could have built something like the Four Gates and let the Hafuna live there. At that time, their race was not so large. They would have been comfortable." Talis strode over to the glass wall and raised his hands to the night sky. "But no! Heaven forbid the minority take control. So a few people wouldn't have gone quietly, and our great secret would have been let out. They said the Hafuna would have fallen apart when they realised there was such a thing as magic, and that the monsters under their beds were sometimes real. If they are that frail, then all the more reason not to let them control the world. It is only a matter of time before they fall apart." Talis turned back to Requiem, fire burning in his eyes. Even the chandelier could feel his rage and began to lose its melodies in exchange for unnerving clanging. As you can imagine, being of human origin, we and the Hafuna all have something in common: war. So we magical races fought, and to the winner the spoils of war would be their version of peace. And those that would have walked the earth freely nearly won. It was in their grasp. Jerking away from Requiem, Talis continued in a downcast tone. "But then the Hafuna joined forces with those foolish members of the Akatsuki that would give the world up. I don't know how such powerless creatures could have shifted the balance so greatly, but they won out." Talis turned to Requiem and spoke with bitter regret. The decrees of the Alliance were formed on the smouldering battleground. The Four Gates were formed for those that sided with the Hafuna, and free passage throughout the earth was granted to them. Those that were in opposition were given a prison and were banished through the Fifth Gate, never to return. All the rage had now gone from Talis's eyes. The chandelier calmed, and Talis looked deflated as he continued somberly. "You can imagine what some would try to do if they knew of the Fifth Gate, and all those incarcerated there. It would make martyrs out of them, and cause others to repeat their actions. This is why all records of the war and the Fifth Gate have been erased. Only a few, including those in the ivory tower, know the truth. Talis materialised the canister of blood that Requiem had given him. Some relics of the truth still exist. Take this blood, for instance. This is blood of the greatest vampire that has ever lived, a true vampire of legend. Romulus and Remus are life-size replicas of him. It was said that he gave his blood to keep those that needed it alive and fighting. It is said that such is the potency of this blood that it gives the drinker the ability to unlock all of their power and allows them to be as strong as they could ever physically be. Talis gazed thoughtfully at the blood. Did you know a person only uses about a third of their muscle strength? Just like when lightning strikes the body. The drinking of this blood unlocks so much more of that unused strength. This blood almost won them the war. Pondering these words, Requiem broke his silence. So why have the council given this to you? It would appear that they know that you sympathise with those of the Fifth Gate. Talis regained his vigour. Perhaps it is a sign. Perhaps they want to correct the mistakes of the past. They want the Fifth Gate opened and those people released. I can't see that somehow, replied Requiem dismissively. Can't you? Replied Talis. The book told you as much. You said yourself it spoke of you being powerful enough to conquer the world. Think of the power bestowed upon the person who opens the Fifth Gate and leads its people unto the world. The echo of Talis's voice in the ballroom was cut short. The melodies of the crystal chandelier ceased, and into the silence, Requiem spoke firmly. I think we should be getting back. Geo must have been beaten by now. As you wish, conceded Talis with a half-smile. With the downward flick of his cloak, a chandelier came crashing down on top of them. Requiem shielded his head, but no impact came to pass. He opened his eyes to find himself standing in the games room with Talis by his side. Geo was a sweating wreck, flaked out on a giant beanbag with both Freya and Duracell heatedly playing table football. You lost, didn't you? Requiem stated rather than asked. Breathless, Geo replied, Now hang on, I didn't... Before he could finish his sentence, Geo sank into the beanbag, tired and defeated. Victoria's cries could be heard from the football table, and Requiem turned to see Freya fling her hands into the air and declare herself Babyfoot Champion of the World. Requiem smirked and turned back to Geo, but he was gone. Geo! Geo! Requiem shouted.